welcome to the last breakout session. It's very exciting. Thank you for coming. We're going to talk about teaching technique because software is an industry that's growing really fast. To grow fast, you need good people. So let's talk technique for, making more good software developers. Before we do, shout out to our fabulous sponsors that let us all be here today. It's pretty fabulous. Yay! A bit of info about me. I've been coding about 2 years now. I came through the developer program at MYOB, which for those who don't know is a program aimed to help women transition into tech careers. I started in that in August last year, and I joined the graduate program at MYOB in February this year. Before that, I was a musician and music teacher for 17 years, and I have 2 cats. You'll notice there are 4 cats in that picture. My housemate also has 2 cats. You may recognize some of the cats that are coming up. Super coincidental. We also blog together, so that's probably why we ended up. So before we begin, I run a blues night and we give surveys out every so often, and people tell us everything that they want us to fix, and we fix it. And sometimes we drop some things that we were doing that they really liked. So before we talk about things we can improve in technology teaching, here are some things that are really fantastic. So throughout my time learning software development, I joined the Ruby community, I've been to junior devs, there have been lots of really, really helpful people. It's been really clear that feedback is super, super valuable. And this is kind of feedback on my learning journey. And I'm only able to stand up here and deliver it because it's been so clear that it's valuable and it's something I can offer to the community. So that's really exciting. The other thing is that everybody is so happy to help. It's been incredible coming from music, which can have a bit of a scarcity culture. Like, if I help someone, then there's less time for me to work on my stuff. Software development and the tech industry in general is so much better at saying, no, I got 10 minutes for you, I got 20 minutes for you, I got 3 hours for you, I'm going to help you out. So keep doing that as you try out, hopefully, some of these techniques. Is music technique applicable to tech? Obviously, I think yes. I'm standing up here. But I've said this to a few developers, and they've said that software development is really, really complex. Like, okay, sure. It's good, the crowd here is with me, I like it. Is music a complex, abstract skill on the same level of software development? Well, this is something that I think is pretty applicable to both. Complex, abstract skill involving the synthesis of multiple, sometimes competing ideas into a cohesive whole. This absolutely describes music performance and music composition. I think we can all agree it also describes being a developer. So a bit of an example for music performance. If you're playing a piece from a couple of 100 years ago, it has a historical context. You've got to learn about that. And probably it was written for an instrument that no longer exists, or that has changed significantly. You can hunt down an old instrument that you don't really know how to play, but is more like what the composer was writing for, or you can play on a new instrument that sounds a bit different but you're really familiar with. Naturally, there's reams and reams of academic discourse on what you should do. You have to read it, and you have to decide, and you have to justify that decision, which sounds a lot like being a developer. Also, if you go to music composition, again, abstract, complex, very similar to development. This was written nearly 200 years ago. The bit that you can see goes for 20 seconds. The whole piece goes for 50 minutes. You can imagine how much ink and paper they needed. And while you're writing this sort of piece, you're imagining the sound of potentially 38 individual lines of music, imagining how many different instruments you've got, what they each sound like, what they sound like when they're high or when they're low, how many of them you've got, so how loud you can get them, and also the limitations of playing that instrument. If you're playing like a keyboard instrument, you've only got 2 hands, so you can't play a note here and here and here and here at the same time. If it's a wind instrument, flute players can only play so long before they pass out. It's generally considered rude to make your players pass out. So from my view, if you want a complex abstraction, music's got you covered. And it's been training and passing down this complex abstraction for hundreds of years. So hopefully you're with me in that this is something we're going to learn from. It's going to be good. And we're going to talk about 3 different areas today. We're going to talk about outcomes-based learning, accommodating learning styles, and the idea that we can't be what we can't see. So developing taste and showing coders what sort of coder they could be. First up, learning outcomes. Who's heard of acceptance criteria? Yep, great, excellent. You can use them for your learning as well. So if we think about Bloom's taxonomy in the sense of learning about unit tests, can I recall what a unit test is? Can I understand what a unit test is? Can I write my own unit test and apply? Can I analyze? Can I draw connections between unit tests, integration tests, acceptance tests? Can I evaluate how good my unit tests are, how good someone else's are, how good the code coverage is? Can I write a test framework right at the top and create new testing ideas and principles? So when you're teaching someone or when you're mentoring someone, you can sit with them and ask, where do you think you are with this? And where do I think you are? And really analyze why they may or may not know a particular thing. Important to do. I didn't start timing my talk. Oh well, we'll just see how far we get. Next up, we right? Yeah. It's the last one for the day. Nearly. We've got to go downstairs afterwards. Second thing, accommodating learning styles. So when you're a music teacher, you're usually teaching children, and they can't tell you normally what their learning style is, but fortunately you see a lot of kids. So over 17 years of teaching, I probably saw 40 kids a week sometimes. Sometimes they were the same kids. Sometimes I taught summer school and saw 200 kids for 2 weeks and never met them again. Some of those kids I taught for 5 or 10 years, which really gives you an idea to understand how bad your explanations were, because you see how bad, you see the result of that explanation 5 years later, and you develop an understanding of what sorts of explanations close doors for people, and what sorts of explanations allow for really further growth and allow them to expand on those ideas, which is really fantastic. But as mentors in software, we don't tend to hang with people for that long. The industry doesn't. Not a lot of people who you mentor for 5 or 10 years probably, but you are mentoring adults. So they can tell you a whole bunch of stuff about how they learn, about how they need to learn, and we're going to go through some ideas about what those differences might be. Bring on the cat pictures. First up, types of resources. I personally don't like to sleep on top of a clothes hanger, but my cat does, so that's great. I'm going to give that to her. As a teacher, I really enjoyed scales, but only about 5% of the kids I taught really liked scales. Someone's nodding up there, they were not into scales either. That's fair. So as a music teacher, I would go to my colleagues and say, hey, look, I don't really know studies because I don't like them that much, but tell me, what are your favourite studies? And I would ask all my flute teaching colleagues and my piano teaching colleagues, so that I developed a bank of resources that weren't what I needed to learn, but they were what my students needed to learn, developing more and more of those. As a coder, I like really boring books. It's just me. I'm not so much into videos, but you give me a big, thick, boring book, yes. But that's, everybody's different. So if I'm mentoring someone, I'm not going to hand over my stack of boring books. I'm going to ask them, how do you best learn? Do you like videos? Do you like blog posts? Do you like Ruby for beginners? Do you like whatever it is? And they can tell me. Second one is types of feedback. So when you're a music teacher, sometimes you will write feedback as the student is playing. Sometimes you will give them feedback at the end of a piece. And there are some teachers, and they're kind of considered to be the scary teachers, that will stop you 3 notes in and say, no, that was terrible, you have to go again. And all those apply to software teaching as well. Like, some students will like you to query them on the very first variable name, like, justify your decision. For some people, that will be really, really great. They want to hear that sort of detail. Some people want to show you the whole program. They want to show you the work that they've done, in the same way that a music student wants to get to the end of the piece before you evaluate what they've done across the week. Different types, different pace. Speaking of pace, everybody likes a different sort of pace. I like all the information coming at me all the time, really, really interesting. And some music students like to work on 3 or 4 different types of pieces at once. They want to do a piece from 200 years ago, a piece from 100 years ago, and some jazz, and some of this, and some of that. They want to merge it all together. Some people are like, nope, I am going to get really good at Mozart, and that's what I think about, and that's what I'm really interested in. Same is true for software developers. All sorts of junior developers and learning coders have different stuff that they want to be across in different ways. And also about the frequency of feedback. We talked a little bit about stopping you three notes in, or not stopping you 3 notes in, but it also applies to, is it written feedback? Is it commenting on codes and on pull requests? Is it I see you once a week? Is it I see you every day? All that sort of stuff. Next up, think about what's happening outside of your time with the student. The first 5 minutes of a music lesson are actually scheduled catch-up time. As a student, you're like, oh, when are we going to get started? But the teacher is deliberately not starting yet because we want to know how your week has been. We want to know if you've been, for example, up late every night performing the school musical. If so, we won't expect you to have done any practice, and we won't expect you to be particularly on the ball. And that's the same is very true of juniors, software developers, especially if they're career changes. I've got a lot of time outside of work to think about what I've been taught, to read my boring books, all that sort of stuff. But if someone's got kids, got caring responsibilities, got another job outside of what they're doing with you, they're not going to have time to process stuff outside of their time with you. You're going to have to give them time with you and not expect them to have processed everything you told them yesterday because they were taking care of small children, whatever it is. So that kind of thinking about what's happening outside. And this brings us to the outside influence thing. There's a phrase that is maybe my least favourite phrase, which is, "You haven't struggled enough for me to help you." Please never say that to your junior ever. Because you don't know how much someone struggled. My mum, as a teacher, she has a really beautiful story about how many poker chips someone has when they get up in the morning. And kids who come to school with their lunch packed for them, and they've got their shoes shined and their hair brushed, they've clearly had plenty of sleep, they got a lot of poker chips to spend on the day. Kids who maybe didn't get to have breakfast, they don't have new shoes, they didn't have someone to kiss them on the cheek goodbye when they came in the morning, they don't have as many poker chips. And you can't expect them to have as many poker chips to spend on their learning. So that's something, when you're teaching children, you really think about. I think it's really applicable to adults as well, and probably not just adults you're teaching, in adults you're working with. Yeah. How many poker chips does everyone have today? Bit of a thought. Also think about motivating factors for your students. Some students love games, some students love really big goals, some students love small goals, and especially around, do they like building real things or non-real things? Mostly. All right, next up. Last thing in our list of techniques, we can't be what we can't see. We normally see this coming up around diversity and inclusion, but it really counts for learning as well. If we never see good code, or if we never see good coding practices, we can't take them on ourselves. So, there's a bunch of ways that music teachers structure their classes that we could structure our software learning as well. First up, music teachers play for students every week. When I was teaching flute, I'd have it there all the time, twiddle away, and my student would play after me. In this way, I'm developing taste every time. Every time the student comes into my classroom, I'm developing their understanding of what good music sounds like, and then I never have to tell them where to breathe. I never have to tell them what it should sound like, because they've heard me. So showing students good real-world code early and often, and explaining the trade-offs as well. We make trade-offs in production code. Shock horror. But we're going to have to make those decisions ourselves once we're working, as mid-level developers, as senior developers. And the more of those we can make with you, and the more of those of your decisions that you explain to us, the better we're going to be at it. Similarly with playing with students in performances. So music teachers will often put on performances with their students. Sometimes you'll lead the ensemble as a music teacher. Sometimes you'll ask one of your students to lead the ensemble, and you'll play second fiddle, as it were, to your student. And it's a really powerful thing for a student to be able to take that responsibility. Similarly with software. This is like massive thumbs up for any pairing that you do in your workplace with your juniors. Fantastic. Explaining all the things that you do and why you do them, really fantastic thing to do. Others have whole talks about the benefits of pairing, so I'll leave that there. This is a bit of a weird one, code analysis. So in music, we analyze all the music that we play. So we go through the sheet music and we look at how the composer has made their decisions or what decisions they've made. And if you look at code as well, you can kind of follow through the process of how they named variables, and you could go through and you could explain, I think this variable is really well named, or this one isn't, any and all of the above, to show us what is really good code. Again, developing that taste. And also, we encourage our students, when we're musicians, to go and see other musicians play. So you might encourage your student to go and pair with other people in the company, or other people outside the company, to learn as much as possible. The final technique here is to know when a mentee or a protege has outgrown your teaching. One of my very early music theory students became a colleague, and now she is my piano teacher, and she tells me off for not practicing enough, and she's right. But this is a similar thing in software development. Know when someone naturally feels like a colleague now, or they naturally feel like someone who you really want to work with, but you don't necessarily want to have a mentoring role with them anymore, and let them kind of outgrow that. It's almost a gratuitous cat picture, actually. It's just more cat pictures. So here is all the stuff that we kind of talked about. We talked about having clear and well understood learning outcomes. We talked about Bloom's taxonomy. And there's many, many other teaching resources. There's a resources slide coming up. We talked about accommodating different learning styles and adjusting for everybody's pace and type of feedback, and straight up asking your mentee, what sort of feedback do you like? And we also talked about developing taste by really showing your learners what they need to be. Show them the types of practice they need to use, show them good work habits, and also really good code. Since I've been working with someone who's got a really, really good reducing their number of tabs game, and I'm getting much better at not having loads of tabs open. It's good for me. So lots and lots of information. What are we going to do with it? Take one or two things. Take a little bit, take a lot, but try. Here's a nice resources slide. If any of that sparks something in you, you're like, oh, lesson plans. I could look up some lesson plans. I could look up Bloom's taxonomy. There's a great blog post from someone who uses acceptance criteria in their mentoring at MYOB. Really fantastic. Also, you can come and chat to me about teaching technique anytime. I really enjoy talking about it. Because it's a really powerful way to transfer information, and it's a really the apprentice model is a really powerful one and a really applicable one, I think, for software development. All the phones have gone down. Beautiful. That's the end. Thank you.